The cantina on Zarian Station was dark and smoky. Blue lights cast strange shadows on the metal walls. The air smelled of alien drinks and old sweat. In the corner sat Commander HFY, his forearms wrapped around a glass of fermented kelp wine. His third glass tonight. HFY was old for a Velkari. His chitinous shell bore scars from many battles. One of his arms ended at the elbow, lost in a war most people tried to forget. His compound eyes watched the room, always alert, always careful. A group of young cadets entered the cantina. They wore crisp uniforms from the Coalition Academy. There was a tall Zentari with blue skin, two small Grex twins with their metal implants gleaming, and a Throkan whose tentacles moved with nervous energy. They looked around the room with wide eyes. The Zentari cadet spotted HFY first. He whispered to his friends, pointing at the old veteran. They had heard stories about him. Stories about the war. Stories about humans. The cadets approached his table slowly. The Zentari spoke first, his voice shaky with excitement. "Commander HFY, we are cadets from the Academy. We heard you fought in the Terran Coalition War." HFY looked up from his drink. His compound eyes studied each young face. "That was a long time ago, cadets. Why do you care about an old war?" One of the Grex twins stepped forward. His metal implants clicked as he spoke. "Our professors tell us humans are weak. They say humans only won because they had better ships and weapons. But some veterans say different things." The Throkan cadet's tentacles writhed with curiosity. "They say humans are dangerous in combat. But we have seen humans here on the station. They look so small and soft. How could they be dangerous?" HFY set down his glass. The wine made his thoughts fuzzy, but the memories were still sharp. Too sharp. Humans look weak, yes. They have no natural armor, no claws, no venom. Their bones break easily. The Zentari cadet nodded eagerly. "Exactly. So how did they become famous warriors? It makes no sense." From across the cantina, laughter rang out. A human merchant sat at the bar, drinking something strong. He was middle-aged with gray hair and weathered hands. He had heard the conversation. "You kids have no idea," the human said, still chuckling. "No idea at all." The cadets turned to look at him. The human merchant raised his glass in a mock salute and went back to his drink. HFY's expression changed. His compound eyes went dark and his remaining three arms tensed. The casual laughter had triggered something deep in his memory. Images flashed through his mind. Blood. Screaming. The sound of human voices singing in the darkness. "You want to know about human combat?" HFY said quietly. His voice was different now. Harder. Older. "You want to know why veterans like me wake up screaming sometimes?" The cadets exchanged glances. They sensed the change in the old warrior's mood. The Throkan's tentacles stopped moving. The Grex twin stood perfectly still. "Sit down," HFY ordered. All of you, they sat quickly. HFY finished his wine in one gulp and signaled for another. The server, a nervous Pilkari, brought the bottle to their table and left quickly. "I will tell you about humans," HFY began. "But first you must understand something. Every species in the Coalition fights for reasons. We fight for territory, for resources, for honor, for our families." He poured wine into his glass with a shaking hand. Some spilled on the metal table. Humans fight for all those reasons too, but they also fight for something else, something that makes them different from every other species in the galaxy. "What?" the Zentari cadet whispered. HFY looked directly at him. "They fight like their entire species will die if they lose. Every battle, every skirmish, every single fight. They fight like the universe itself has declared war on them." The cantina seemed quieter now. Other patrons had stopped talking to listen. The human merchant at the bar had turned around, his face serious. "I learned this during the siege of Kepler 442b, HFY continued. 15 years ago, the hegemony had invaded a mining world. Important strategic position. The coalition sent a joint force to defend it." He took another drink. The wine was strong, but not strong enough to wash away the memories. Humans made up only 8% of our force. 8%. Most of us thought they would handle support roles. Maybe logistics, maybe medical work. Their bodies looked so fragile compared to ours. The Grex twin leaned forward. "What happened?" "The coalition commanders gave humans the most dangerous sector to defend. We thought it was because they were expendable. Small numbers, weak bodies. If someone had to die, better them than us." HFY's voice became quieter. "We were wrong. So very wrong. He stared into his wineglass, seeing reflections of a different time, a time when he was younger and thought he understood war. The hegemony attacked in waves, massive forces. Their warriors were bred for combat. 8 feet tall, natural weapons, thick armor. They should have crushed the human sector in minutes. But they didn't, the Throkan asked. No, HFY said. They didn't. The first wave hit the human lines and disappeared, just gone. No retreat signals. No surrender calls, nothing. He took another drink. His hands were shaking more now. The second wave lasted longer. We could hear the fighting, explosions, gunfire, and something else. Something that made my blood cold. What? Singing, HFY whispered. The humans were singing while they fought. War songs from their homeworld. Old songs about death and glory. The cadets looked at each other with confusion. Singing during battle seemed impossible. The third wave broke completely, HFY continued. Hegemony warriors running in terror. These were soldiers bred for war, running from humans like children from nightmares. He finished his glass and poured another. The bottle was nearly empty now. I had to see for myself. I took a squad to the human sector during a lull in the fighting. What I saw there changed everything I thought I knew about war. The cantina was completely silent now. Even the background music had stopped. Everyone was listening to the old veteran's story. The human trenches were full of wounded soldiers, missing limbs, burned by energy weapons, bleeding from wounds that should have killed them. But they were still fighting. Still ready for the next attack? HFY's voice cracked slightly. I saw a human medic with a punctured lung treating other wounded soldiers. She had been fighting for 6 hours. 6 hours with a hole in her chest that would have killed any of us in minutes. The Zentari cadet made a soft sound of disbelief. Their sergeant was the worst, HFY continued. Multiple wounds, burns covering half his body, one arm hanging useless at his side, but he was still giving orders, still preparing his soldiers for battle. How? The Grex twin asked. I asked him that same question, HFY said. I asked how he could still fight with those injuries. You know what he told me? The cadets waited. He said, my soldiers need me alive, so I choose to stay alive. HFY's voice was barely audible now. He chose. Like death was just another order he could refuse to follow. The human merchant at the bar nodded slowly. He understood what the veteran was describing. That was when I learned the truth about humans, HFY said. They don't just fight to win. They fight like their species' survival depends on every single battle. And maybe it does. He looked at each cadet in turn. You want to know why veterans fear humans? Because we learned that night that humans don't just refuse to die, they refuse to let their friends die too. The old warrior fell silent. Outside the cantina, the station hummed with life. But inside, everyone sat quietly, thinking about what they had heard. Finally, the Throkan cadet spoke. What happened next? HFY smiled grimly. Next? Next I will tell you about the day humans taught the galaxy what real war looks like. HFY poured the last of his wine and stared at the empty bottle. The cadets waited patiently for him to continue. Around the cantina, other patrons had moved closer to listen. Even the nervous Pilkari server had stopped working to hear the story. The siege lasted 3 weeks, HFY began. 3 weeks of constant attacks. The hegemony wanted that planet badly. They threw everything at us. Wave after wave of their best warriors, he paused, organizing his thoughts. The wine made some memories fuzzy, but others were crystal clear. By the second week, most coalition forces were exhausted. We fought in shifts, rotating units to let soldiers rest. Standard military practice, logical, sensible. The Zentari cadet nodded. This made sense to him. The humans did not follow standard practice, HFY continued. They never rotated out, never rested. For 3 weeks, the same human soldiers held the same positions. How is that possible? One of the Grex twins asked. I wondered the same thing. I went to their medical station to check on wounded soldiers. What I saw there? HFY shook his head. Human doctors were treating soldiers with injuries that should have sent them home. Missing fingers, burned skin, broken bones. But these soldiers just got patched up and went back to fighting. The Throkan's tentacles curled with confusion. They should have been evacuated. That is what any sane species would do, HFY agreed. But I learned that humans have something we do not. They have a chemical their bodies make during combat. They call it adrenaline. The cadets looked at each other blankly. Adrenaline makes humans stronger when they are hurt, faster when they are afraid, more dangerous when they are dying. Zephai's voice dropped to a whisper. I saw a human soldier lose his arm to enemy fire. Instead of falling down or calling for help, he picked up the severed arm and beat an enemy warrior to death with it. The cantina was dead silent. The medic who treated him told me this was normal human behavior. Normal, she said. Humans often become more dangerous when they are wounded, not less. The Grex twin with the clicking implant spoke up. Our biology classes never mentioned this. Your biology classes study normal species, HFY replied. Humans are not normal. Their entire evolutionary history prepared them for war. Their homeworld tried to kill them every day. Predators, diseases, natural disasters. Humans survived by becoming the most dangerous thing on their planet. He gestured toward the human merchant at the bar. Look at him. Soft skin, no claws, no natural armor. But his ancestors hunted creatures 10 times their size with primitive weapons. They survived ice ages. They crossed oceans in wooden boats. They looked at the most dangerous environments in their world and decided to live there anyway. The human merchant heard this and smiled slightly. He raised his glass in another silent salute. On the 15th day of the siege, something changed, HFY continued. The hegemony launched their largest attack yet. Thousands of warriors, war machines, flying support. They hit every sector at once. He paused to steady his nerves. This was the hardest part to remember. Most coalition units fell back to secondary positions. Standard procedure when facing overwhelming force. Better to retreat and regroup than be wiped out. But the humans? The Throcan asked. The humans did not retreat. They could not. Their sector was critical. If they fell back, the entire defense would collapse. So they made a choice. HFY's remaining hands clenched into fists. They chose to die rather than retreat. The cadets stared at him in shock. I was monitoring communications from the command center. I heard the human commander talking to his soldiers. He told them the situation, told them they were outnumbered 10-1, told them retreat was not possible. What did they say? The Zentari whispered. They started singing again. But different songs this time. Older songs, darker songs, songs about last stands and glorious deaths. HFY's voice cracked. They were saying goodbye to each other. The old veteran took a shaky drink. Then reinforcements arrived. More humans. They had broken through enemy lines to reach the besieged sector. They were singing too. The same songs? No, these were victory songs. Battle hymns. They sang about coming home alive. HFY's compound eyes reflected the cantina lights. That was when I understood. Humans do not sing to stay brave. They sing to coordinate attacks. He leaned forward, his voice intense. Each song was a signal. Different melodies meant different tactics. They were communicating in a way the enemy could not understand or intercept. The Grex twins exchanged amazed looks. Their mechanical brains were calculating the tactical advantages of such a system. The reinforcements hit the hegemony forces from behind, while the besieged humans attacked from the front. The enemy was caught completely off guard. Did the humans win? Win? HFY laughed bitterly. They did not just win. They destroyed the entire hegemony attack force. Thousands of enemy warriors killed or captured. The humans suffered heavy casualties too, but they kept fighting. He finished his drink and signaled for another bottle. I saw their wounded being carried to medical stations. Soldiers with terrible injuries still giving orders to their comrades. Still planning the next defense. The server brought a new bottle but kept her distance. The entire cantina was listening now. The human commander found me after the battle. Colonel Sarah Martinez. Small woman, maybe half my size. She had been shot twice and had burns on her face, but she walked up to me like nothing had happened. HFY poured fresh wine with steady hands. The alcohol was helping him tell the story. She thanked me for the intelligence reports my unit had provided. Thanked me like it was a normal conversation, like she had not just led the most brutal defensive action of the entire war. What did you say to her? I asked her how human soldiers could keep fighting with such terrible wounds. She looked at me with those strange human eyes and said something I will never forget. The cadets waited breathlessly. She said, Commander, we are not fighting for victory. We are fighting so our friends can go home to their families. As long as our friends are still in danger, we cannot allow ourselves to die. The human merchant at the bar turned around to face them. His eyes were wet. That was when I realized the truth, HFY continued. Other species fight for objectives. Humans fight for each other. They form bonds stronger than any military discipline. Stronger than fear of death. He took a long drink. Colonel Martinez told me about human military tradition. She said human soldiers have a saying, leave no one behind. It means they will never abandon a comrade, even if it means certain death. The Throcan's tentacles had gone completely still. Even if it is strategically foolish? Especially then, Zephi replied. Humans value individual lives over tactical advantage. They will sacrifice missions to save single soldiers. They will charge into hopeless situations to recover wounded comrades. That sounds inefficient, the Grex twin observed. Yes, Zephi agreed, but it makes them fight harder than any other species. Every human soldier knows their comrades will die before abandoning them. This makes them incredibly brave, incredibly dangerous. The old veteran stared into his wine glass. The siege ended 2 days later. The hegemony withdrew their remaining forces rather than face the humans again. They gave up. Their commander sent a message to coalition headquarters. It said the humans were unsuitable opponents for civilized warfare. They refused to fight them anymore. The cadets looked stunned. The idea of an enemy refusing to fight seemed impossible. That was my first real lesson about human combat, Zephi said. But it was not the last, oh no. The worst was yet to come. He looked around the cantina. Every face was focused on him. Even the human merchant was leaning forward to hear better. You want to know about the hive ship incident? Zephi asked quietly. You want to know about the day humans taught the galaxy what true terror looks like? The cadets nodded eagerly, though they looked nervous about what they might hear. Zephi smiled grimly. Then let me tell you about the day humans volunteered for a suicide mission. And succeeded. The new bottle of wine sat untouched on the table. Zephi's hands had stopped shaking, but his compound eyes stared into the distance. The cantina had grown completely quiet. Even the background music had been turned off. The hegemony hive ship was the largest vessel ever built. Zephi began slowly. 15 kilometers long, crew of 50,000, armed with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. He paused, gathering his thoughts. This story was harder to tell than the siege. It appeared in the Proxima system during the second year of the war. Our fleet was protecting a major supply depot, critical resources for the entire coalition war effort. The Zentari cadet leaned forward. How big was your fleet? 200 ships, Zephi replied. The largest coalition force ever assembled. Representatives from every member species. The best commanders. The most advanced weapons. He finally reached for his wine glass. The hive ship destroyed 40% of our fleet in the first hour. Gasps echoed around the cantina. 40% losses in 1 hour was unthinkable. Our weapons barely scratched its hull. Its shields absorbed everything we could throw at it. Meanwhile, it was systematically destroying our ships one by one. Zephi took a small sip of wine. The fleet commander called an emergency meeting. All senior officers. We needed a new strategy or the entire fleet would be lost. What did the commanders decide? Most wanted to retreat. Save what ships we could. Regroup and try again later with different tactics. Zephi's voice became bitter. Sensible, logical, the smart choice. He looked around the room. The human commander disagreed. The Grex twin with the implants clicked nervously. What did the humans suggest? Admiral Rebecca Stone stood up in that meeting and said the most insane thing I had ever heard. She volunteered the human contingent for a boarding mission. Silence fell over the cantina again. A boarding mission, Zephi repeated, against a ship 15 kilometers long, protected by energy shields, surrounded by fighter squadrons, defended by 50,000 enemy soldiers. The Throcan's tentacles writhed with agitation. That is suicide, exactly what every other commander said. The Velkari admiral called it madness. The Zentari general said it was impossible. The Grex collective calculated the survival chances at less than 1%. Zephi's voice became quieter. Admiral Stone just smiled. She said humans specialized in impossible missions. Did the fleet commander approve it? He had no choice. The hive ship was going to destroy us all anyway. At least this way some ships might escape while the humans distracted the enemy. The old veteran drank more wine. The memories were getting more intense. The human ships broke formation and headed straight for the hive ship. 12 vessels. 3,000 human marines. They flew directly into the enemy fire without hesitation. How many ships made it through? 7, Zephi said quietly. 5 ships destroyed before they could dock. 1,000 humans dead before the mission even started. The human merchant at the bar had tears in his eyes now. He knew this story. Every human did. The surviving ships clamped onto the hive ship's hull. The humans cut through the armor with plasma torches and poured inside. 2,000 Marines against 50,000 defenders. SciFi's voice became hollow. We monitored their communications from the fleet. What we heard changed everything. What did you hear? Orders, calm, professional orders. The humans were splitting into small groups, spreading throughout the ship. Instead of staying together for safety, they were deliberately dividing their forces. The Grex twins looked confused. That goes against all tactical logic. Yes, but humans do not think like us. They were not trying to capture the ship through superior numbers. They were trying to create maximum chaos and fear. Sci-Fi leaned back in his chair. Each human squad had specific targets. Life support systems, power generators, command centers, but also something else, something we did not understand at first. What? Terror targets. Places where they could kill the most enemies in the most frightening ways possible. The cantina patrons exchanged worried glances. This was becoming darker than they had expected. The human Marines moved through that ship like predators. They used the corridors and ventilation systems to their advantage. They set traps. They used psychological warfare. SciFi's compound eyes reflected the dim lights. We could hear the enemy communications too. Hegemony soldiers screaming about humans appearing from nowhere, killing sentries silently, leaving the bodies in places where other soldiers would find them. They were hunting, the Throken whispered. Exactly. Humans were not just fighting. They were hunting, stalking their prey through the ship's passages. Using fear as a weapon, the old veteran's voice became softer. I heard one human squad leader talking to his soldiers. He said, "Remember, we are not just trying to win. We are trying to break their will to fight." Did it work? Oh yes, it worked better than anyone expected. Within 2 hours, Hegemony soldiers were abandoning their posts. They were too scared to patrol alone, too terrified to investigate strange noises. SciFi smiled grimly, but the humans were just getting started. He took another drink. The worst part came when they reached the zero-gravity sections of the ship. Most species struggle to fight without gravity. Movement becomes difficult. Weapons are harder to aim, but not humans. Humans evolved from tree-dwelling creatures. They are naturally good at moving in 3 dimensions. In zero gravity, they became like flying nightmares. The image sent shivers through the listening crowd. They attached magnetic clamps to their boots so they could walk on any surface. They used the walls and ceiling as cover. They could attack from any direction. SciFi's voice became intense. I heard the recordings later. Human Marines talking as they fought. One soldier said, "It's like swimming, but with murder." The Zentari cadet made a choking sound. The hegemony forces in the zero-G sections broke completely. They had never faced enemies who could move freely in all directions. Who could attack from above, below, or behind without warning? How long did the boarding action last? 6 hours, SciFi replied. 6 hours for 2,000 humans to capture a ship with 50,000 defenders. The numbers seemed impossible to everyone. Listening, the hegemony commander finally surrendered when the humans reached the bridge, but not because they were about to be killed. The humans could have killed them an hour earlier. Then why did he surrender? Because the humans had systematically destroyed the ship's ability to fight. They had disabled weapons, sabotaged engines, cut power to critical systems. They had turned the most powerful warship in the galaxy into a floating metal box. SciFi leaned forward, but that was not the terrifying part. What was? The terrifying part was how few humans had died doing it. Out of 2,000 Marines, only 300 had been killed. They had achieved a 15-to-1 kill ratio against a prepared enemy on their own ship. The cantina was completely silent now. After the surrender, I was part of the boarding party that secured the ship. What I saw inside, SciFi shook his head. The humans had not just defeated the enemy. They had psychologically destroyed them. What do you mean? Hegemony soldiers were huddled in groups, afraid to be alone. They jumped at every sound. Some were catatonic with fear. These were warriors bred for combat, reduced to terrified children by 6 hours of fighting humans. The old veteran finished his wine in one gulp. The human Marines, meanwhile, were calmly checking their equipment and treating their wounded, like it had been a routine training exercise. How did other coalition species react? Fear, SciFi said simply. Even our own allies were afraid. If humans could do this to the enemy's best ship, what could they do to anyone who opposed them? He looked around the cantina. That was when the galaxy learned the most important lesson about humans, which was, never give humans a mission they think is impossible, because they will not just complete it. They will complete it in the most terrifying way imaginable. The human merchant at the bar nodded slowly. He understood the weight of that reputation. But the hive ship was not the worst thing I saw humans do, SciFi continued. The worst came later, when technology failed and warfare became primitive. He signaled for another bottle. You want to hear about the day humans taught the galaxy what real savagery looks like? A fresh bottle appeared on the table, but SciFi did not touch it immediately. His 3 remaining hands rested flat on the metal surface. The cantina had become completely silent except for the hum of the station's life support systems. Krath 7 was supposed to be the final battle, SciFi began. Both sides had gathered their largest fleets in orbit around a dead world. The plan was simple. Winner takes everything. Loser surrenders unconditionally. He stared at the unopened bottle. Nobody knew about the electromagnetic storms. The Zentari cadet shifted nervously. What kind of storms? Natural phenomenon. The planet's core generated massive energy pulses that disrupted all advanced technology. Ships could barely maintain orbit. Ground-based electronics failed completely. SciFi's compound eyes reflected the dim cantina lights. Both fleets were forced to land and fight with primitive weapons. No energy shields, no plasma rifles, no communication systems. How primitive? The Grex twin asked, his implants clicking with concern. Kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, sharpened metal, the kind of tools our ancestors used thousands of years ago. The old veteran finally opened the new bottle and poured himself a drink. Most coalition species were terrified. We had not fought without technology for millennia. Our training focused on advanced weapons and computerized tactics. But the humans were different. The humans were excited, SciFi said quietly. Excited. While other species panicked about losing their advanced equipment, humans started making new weapons from scrap metal. He took a small sip of wine. I watched human engineers turn broken ship parts into swords and spears. They made explosives from medical supplies. They crafted armor from hull plating. The Throkan's tentacles curled with fascination. They knew how to do this. Every human soldier carried knowledge of primitive warfare. Their military training included courses on fighting without technology. They called it baseline combat skills. SciFi's voice became darker. What they did not tell us was that humans preferred fighting this way. Silence fell over the cantina again. The first engagement happened 3 days after landing. A mixed coalition unit encountered hegemony forces near a crashed supply ship. Standard skirmish. Maybe 200 soldiers on each side. Who won? The humans won. But that is not the important part. The important part is how they won. SciFi drank more wine. While Velkari and Zentari soldiers struggled with unfamiliar weapons, humans moved through the battlefield like they had been born for it. What do you mean? They used terrain tactically. They set ambushes. They coordinated attacks with hand signals and primitive calls. They fought like their ancestors had fought on their homeworld for millions of years. The old veteran's voice became hushed. But the most disturbing thing was their endurance. Endurance? Other species tired quickly without technological support. Heavy armor became a burden. Complex maneuvers became impossible. But humans kept fighting. For hours, for days. SciFi looked around the room. I saw a human soldier fight continuously for 18 hours. No rest, no relief, no advanced stimulants, just natural human determination. That is impossible, the Grex twin protested. I thought so too, until I learned about human evolutionary history. Their ancestors were persistence hunters. They chased prey across vast distances until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. The human merchant at the bar nodded slightly. He knew this story. Humans carried those same traits into modern warfare. They could outlast any opponent in sustained combat. Other species would fight in bursts, then rest. Humans just kept going. SciFi's voice became more intense. The worst example happened during the Battle of Iron Ridge, a strategic position that both sides needed to control. What happened there? A human platoon was cut off from the main force. 30 soldiers surrounded by 300 enemies. No communication. No support. No hope of rescue. He paused to steady himself. They held that position for 5 days. 5 days? Against 10-to-1 odds, using nothing but primitive weapons and field fortifications they built from rocks and scrap metal. They turned a simple hilltop into an impregnable fortress. HFY's compound eyes went dark. The hegemony threw wave after wave of soldiers at them. The humans killed them all. How? Traps, ambushes, psychological warfare. They used their enemies' own fears against them. The old veteran's voice became barely audible. They started collecting trophies. Trophies? Weapons from fallen enemies, armor pieces, personal items. They arranged these in patterns around their position where attacking forces would see them. The cantina patrons looked sick. It was not just about intimidation. The humans were sending a message. This is what happens to anyone who attacks us. HFY took a large gulp of wine. By the third day, hegemony soldiers were refusing orders to assault the position. They had heard stories about what the humans were doing to prisoners. What were they doing? Nothing. That was the genius of it. The humans never took prisoners during that battle, but they let rumors spread that they were torturing captives. They let the enemy's imagination create fears worse than reality. The Throkan's tentacles had gone completely rigid. Psychological warfare. The most effective kind. The hegemony soldiers were more afraid of being captured than of being killed. This made them fight desperately, which led to mistakes, which led to more deaths. HFY's voice became hollow. On the fourth day, I was part of a relief column sent to help the surrounded platoon. What we found? He stopped talking and stared into his wine glass. What did you find? The Zentari cadet whispered. Bodies. Hundreds of enemy bodies arranged in defensive lines around the human position. The humans had been using their own enemies as fortifications. Gasps echoed through the cantina. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the condition of the human soldiers. What condition? They were wounded. All of them. Missing fingers. Broken bones. Burns from chemical weapons. Some had been fighting with injuries that should have killed them days earlier. HFY's voice cracked, but they were still alert. Still ready to fight. They had been taking turns sleeping and standing guard for 5 days straight. How were they still alive? Human physiology. Their bodies can function on minimal food and water for extended periods. Their pain tolerance is beyond anything we understand. Their will to survive defies all logic. The old veteran looked directly at each cadet. The platoon leader was a sergeant named Maria Santos. She had been shot twice, had a broken arm, and had not eaten in 2 days. But she still gave a complete tactical report when we arrived. What did she say? She apologized for not taking any prisoners. Said it had been tactically inadvisable under the circumstances. HFY laughed bitterly. Tactically inadvisable? Like refusing to commit suicide was a minor tactical decision. He finished his wine and immediately poured another glass. That battle changed how every coalition species viewed humans. We realized they were not just good soldiers. They were apex predators who had learned to use technology. What do you mean? Strip away their machines and weapons and humans become more dangerous, not less. They return to their natural state, as the most effective killers their planet ever produced. The cantina was completely silent now. The hegemony, commander on Krath 7, sent a message to his superiors. After Iron Ridge, he said humans were unsuitable for civilized warfare and requested permission to use chemical weapons. Did his superiors approve? No. They ordered a complete withdrawal from the planet instead. HFY's compound eyes reflected the cantina lights. An entire army retreated rather than continue fighting humans under primitive conditions. Because of one battle? Because that one battle showed what humans could do when reduced to their most basic level. Other species become weaker without technology. Humans become stronger. The old veteran stood up slowly, his remaining 3 arms supporting his weight. The war ended 6 months later. Not because of superior coalition technology or tactics, but because the enemy could not psychologically handle fighting humans anymore. He looked around the cantina one final time. You wanted to know about human combat? Now you know. They are not just warriors. They are the thing that other warriors have nightmares about. HFY sat back down heavily. But there is one more thing you need to understand about humans. The most important thing of all. HFY sat quietly for several minutes, staring at his wine glass. The cantina remained silent. Nobody wanted to interrupt the old veteran's thoughts. Outside, the station hummed with normal activity. But inside this small space, time seemed frozen. Finally, one of the Grex twins spoke softly. What is the most important thing about humans? Zeph looked up slowly. His compound eyes were tired but still sharp. The most important thing is what they did after the war ended. After? Yes. After they had proven themselves the most terrifying warriors in the galaxy. After they had broken enemy armies and captured impossible objectives. After they had shown every species what real war looked like. The old veteran poured himself another drink with steady hands. The hegemony surrendered unconditionally. Complete victory for the coalition. The humans had won their first interstellar war. That sounds like a good ending, the Throkan observed. You would think so, Zeph agreed, but humans do not think like other species. While we celebrated victory, they were already planning something else. What? Peace, Zeph said simply. Real peace. Not just the absence of war, but actual cooperation between former enemies. The cadets looked confused. What do you mean? Most species would have demanded tribute from the defeated hegemony. Territory, resources, reparations for war damages. Standard victors' rights. Zeph's voice became softer. The humans refused all of it. They refused? Admiral Stone spoke for the human delegation at the surrender ceremony. She said humans had not fought for conquest or wealth. They had fought to protect their friends and stop the killing. The old veteran took a small sip of wine. She announced that humans would provide medical aid to former enemies, food for hegemony colonies that were starving, technology to help rebuild destroyed worlds. They helped their enemies, not just helped. They insisted on it. Against strong opposition from other coalition species, we wanted to punish the hegemony, make them pay for starting the war. Zeph's compound eyes reflected the cantina lights. The humans said punishment would only create more wars in the future. They wanted to create something that had never existed before, which was a galaxy where different species could coexist peacefully, where conflicts were resolved through negotiation instead of violence, where war became a last resort instead of a first option. The Zentari cadet shook his head in amazement. After everything they had been through? Because of everything they had been through, Zeph corrected. Humans understand war better than any other species. They know its true cost. What cost? Not just the soldiers who die, not just the ships that are destroyed, but the damage war does to everyone involved. The hatred it creates, the fear it spreads, the way it makes everyone less than they could be. Zeph's voice became quiet. I learned this during the Reconstruction period. I was assigned to work with human peacekeeping forces on former hegemony worlds. What were they like? Different. Completely different from the warriors I had fought beside. These humans were doctors and teachers and engineers. They were building schools and hospitals instead of fortifications. The old veteran smiled slightly, but they were the same humans. The same species that had terrified the galaxy with their combat abilities. They had just chosen to use those same traits for creation instead of destruction. How? Human determination, human endurance, human refusal to give up. They applied all of these to rebuilding instead of fighting. Zeph looked around the cantina. I saw human doctors work 18-hour shifts treating former enemies. Engineers who rebuilt power systems on hostile worlds without any security. Teachers who learned alien languages so they could educate war orphans. That must have been dangerous work. Very dangerous. Many former hegemony citizens still hated all coalition species. There were terrorist attacks, assassinations, sabotage attempts. The old veteran's voice became intense. The humans refused to arm themselves or request military protection. They said weapons would undermine trust. They wanted to prove that not all outsiders were conquerors. Did any of them get killed? Yes, dozens, maybe hundreds. Humans who had survived the worst battles of the war were murdered while delivering medical supplies or teaching children to read. Zeph's compound eyes went dark, but more humans volunteered to replace them. Always more volunteers. They said the work was too important to abandon because of danger. Why was it so important to them? Because humans understand something other species do not. They know that every war contains the seeds of the next war. Unless you change the fundamental conditions that cause the conflict, it will happen again. The old veteran took a larger drink. Humans had studied their own history, thousands of years of warfare on their home world. They learned that victory in battle means nothing if you do not win the peace that follows. Did their plan work? Look around you, Zeph said, gesturing at the diverse crowd in the cantina. Former enemies drinking together, trading together, serving on the same military units. This station has citizens from 50 different species, including former hegemony worlds. The cadets looked around with new eyes. They had never thought about how remarkable the current peace really was. The humans created something unprecedented in galactic history, a multi-species civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest. It has lasted 50 years without a major war. 50 years of peace, the Throkan mused. That is remarkable. More than remarkable. It is miraculous. And it exists because humans chose to be builders instead of conquerors after they had won the right to be anything they wanted. SciFi's voice became very quiet. But there is something else you need to know about this peace. What? It exists because everyone remembers what humans can do when peaceful solutions fail. The cantina fell silent again. Every species in the galaxy knows the stories. The siege, the hive ship, the broken planet. We all remember what happens when humans are forced to fight. SciFi looked directly at each cadet. That is the real secret of human combat effectiveness. Not their weapons or tactics or physical abilities, but the fact that they only fight when they have no other choice. What do you mean? Other species fight for many reasons. Territory, resources, honor, revenge. But humans only fight when something they truly care about is threatened. The old veteran's voice became intense. When humans fight, everyone knows it is because peaceful solutions have been exhausted. This makes their enemies question whether the conflict is really worth the cost. Because humans fight so hard? Because humans fight like they have nothing left to lose. Like the survival of everything they love depends on winning. SciFi finished his wine and set the glass down carefully. Most species can accept honorable defeat. Humans cannot. They will keep fighting until they win or until there is nothing left to fight for. That sounds terrifying. It is. But it is also why we have peace. Everyone knows that starting a war with humans means fighting until one side is completely destroyed. The old veteran stood up slowly. So we choose negotiation instead. Compromise instead of conflict. Trade instead of war. Because we are afraid of humans? Because we respect what humans are capable of when they are forced to fight. There is a difference. SciFi looked toward the human merchant at the bar. The man had been listening to the entire story with tears in his eyes. That human over there? SciFi said quietly. He is probably a veteran too. Maybe he fought at Kepler 442b. Maybe he was part of the hive ship boarding action. Maybe he held the line on some forgotten battlefield. The cadets turned to look at the merchant with new eyes. But now he sells trade goods between star systems. He helps former enemies do business together. He builds bridges instead of destroying them. SciFi's voice became soft. That is what you need to understand about humans. They are not naturally violent. They are naturally protective. They fight to defend what they love, not to destroy what they hate. What is the difference? The difference is what they do after they win. The old veteran picked up his empty bottle and headed toward the bar. The human military has a saying, "We fight so our children do not have to." That is why human warriors become human peacekeepers when the fighting stops. As SciFi approached the bar, the human merchant looked up. Recognition passed between them. Two old soldiers who had survived the same terrible war. "Commander," the human said quietly, "thank you for telling their story truthfully." "Thank you for giving me a story worth telling, Colonel." They shook hands briefly. Two veterans honoring shared memories of sacrifice and loss. SciFi returned to the cadets' table one final time. "You wanted to know about human combat? Now you know. But remember this above all else, humans are most dangerous when they are fighting for peace." "What do you mean?" "When humans fight for conquest, they can be defeated. When they fight for revenge, they can be satisfied. But when they fight for peace..." SciFi's compound eyes reflected the cantina lights one last time. "When they fight for peace, they will never stop until everyone in the galaxy is safe." The old veteran walked slowly toward the cantina exit. At the doorway, he turned back to face the stunned cadets. "Never fight humans," he said quietly. "But if you must, pray to whatever gods you believe in that you are fighting them when they are trying to be civilized."